Good morning from Brazil, South America. I'm Bud McCord. I hope you're well. We're going to begin a brand new type of discipleship, which I've been thinking about for a long time, and that is by inviting a mentor into our lives, a person that we feel that we can listen to and believe that their motives are correct and their life is worth patterning after. And I have decided that I need every morning the presence of people who've been further down the path than I have been. And over the years, I've been blessed with some mentors that have deeply, deeply impressed me. And one of them is named E.Stanley Jones. I cannot tell you how important the voice of this particular man has been in my life. And so I've decided that I want to share my devotional time with you. I've enjoyed so much these Facebook Live opportunities to talk to people. I see people already coming on, and so many dear, dear friends in the United States, others in Portugal, some in Israel, and different people who will watch this during the day. And it's almost like a small group gathering for people who want to continue to grow in Christ. And so today, what I'd like to do is to introduce you to E. Stanley Jones. Now, I've mentioned already that you can acquire E. Stanley Jones' book on Amazon. It's called Growing Spiritually. You can get it in an ebook, or you can get the book. I still like the paperback, the paper of a book personally. And it's not all that expensive, and it's a treasure, and you will be able to get to know this mentor, E. Stanley Jones. So we're going to begin this morning, and I want to let him speak, and then I'll make a few comments to try and express what I'm hearing, and you can, in your own time and place and way, you can express that. If you want to send me a message on the Facebook comments, I always read those, and if you want to communicate, we can, and we'll see where God takes us on this. We'll see how we can do this with my travel schedule, with your life, and its busyness, I'm sure. So we're going to get started. So let me talk to you a little bit about E. Stanley Jones. E is Eli. It was Eli Stanley Jones. Now, he was born in 1884. Sounds like a long time ago, doesn't it? But it really isn't all that far when you come to think about history of human beings. 1884, and he lived until 1973. He was a Methodist missionary, American Methodist missionary, and he had a passion for people, especially people in difficult situations. He had a heart for people that were living in poverty and all kinds of people. And some have said that he was the Billy Graham of India. He spent 55 years in India, and that's a long time. And he ministered there. India, I've been to India, and India is a very interesting country because of its 1.3 or 1.4 billion people. Only 3% of the population is Christian. And so he ministered in a country where the majority religion was Hindu, and then Buddhist, and then Islamic. And so he had to develop his ability to express Christianity in the midst of being in a small minority in his country. So different than those of us experienced as we grew up in the United States, for instance, or in Europe somewhere. He is considered by some one of the greatest missionaries that have ever lived, and certainly by many the greatest missionary of the 20th century. He was married. He got married in 1911 to Mabel Losing, I think, or Lossing. I don't exactly know how to pronounce that. Interestingly enough, I think 1911 is the year that my father was born. Gives you a little bit of context of where his world was. He was coming into this new century. He dealt with the First World War. He dealt with the Second World War. The stock market crashes, the rise of the totalitarian governments around the world. And so when we read his devotional literature, you do have to understand that we're listening to someone who was going through the incredible changes of the 20th century with the First World War, the stock market crash, the World War, and he's doing all of that while living in India. And it's a remarkable story. One of his books was called The Christ of the Indian Road, sold over 1 million copies. And I'm talking about back at the beginning of the last century, 1 million copies. And he was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize because he was trying to help avert the Second World War and the war with the United States and Japan. He was highly involved in a lot of those things. And he died in India on January 25th, 1973. Now, I hope you don't take offense or find it strange that I would call him one of my mentors. Most of my mentors that have influenced me in the spiritual realm have already been in heaven a long time. One of the others is Oswald Chambers. I'm going to be doing the same sort of devotional reading in the mornings with the Brazilians in a book called My Utmost for His Highest by Oswald Chambers. We don't have the Stanley Jones books in Portuguese, so I'm going to begin with them with My Utmost for His Highest, another man that profoundly impacted me. What is a mentor? For me, a mentor is someone who helps you answer your questions. I mentor a lot of people, and I have a little way that I do that, and I do it like this. I said, when you have 3 questions that you've worked on and you can't seem to see the answer to it, or maybe you're a little bit insecure, we'll get online and I'll do my best to answer your questions. I don't like the idea of a mentor being someone who's controlling anything, but rather just giving light on a subject. Well, that's what Stanley Jones has been for me. So today I want to read out of his own voice the introduction to this book. And then tomorrow we'll begin with the first devotional. And I really, really hope that you will consider acquiring a copy of this book on Amazon. The title, Growing Spiritually by E.Stanley Jones. I think you'll find it easily, and if you're where Amazon can deliver these books pretty fast, you can get on with it. All right, I'm really excited about this. This is my devotional time. I've just almost all my life been able to begin my day with some sort of devotional reading and to align my mind and my emotions, my will, with the will of God, and it's been a rich part of my particular spiritual journey. I really recommend to pastors, to leaders, to any Christian that you need to get your mind, emotions, and will focused on Jesus from the very outset of the day. It's very incredibly important for the maturing process for you to become the kind of a person who can deliver love continuously. Well, here we go. Let me let him talk. Pay close attention. Every word he writes is full of things that are important to catch. But on the other hand, just relax and let the Holy Spirit work within your life as he does in mine and every Christian's life. He says, in the writing of all my books, I have first tried to sense a need, and then I have the book move in to meet that need, however inadequately. The need has been the call. This has been especially true of this book. One would have thought that in the view of the need of spiritual growth or maturity, there would have been a spate of books on the subject of growing spiritually. But when I asked my publishers about books on that subject, they replied to my astonishment that they could not think of any, nor could I. Plenty of books are on various phases of the subject of growth and development, especially in psychology, but few, if any, covering the subject from a definitively Christian standpoint. This book tries to step into that need and meet it. Boy, I agree with every word he's saying there, even though this was written in 1953, I think it was published. Wow, same problem. Spiritual maturity continues to be the lacking element. And this book tries to meet it at the place where spiritual growth is made or marred, namely at the place of the devotional. And catch this thought. It is at the place of the devotional that we go up or down spiritually. It is the crux. For in the devotional, we expose ourselves to God's resources. Wow, what a statement. It is the crux. For in the devotional, we expose ourselves to God's resources. We assimilate them and grow by them. But it must be an all-around growth of the total person, intellectual, emotional, and volitional. If the devotional becomes merely the emotional, then the decay sets in other parts. And that means a decay of the whole. We must grow totally or grow lopsidedly, which is not growth, except in the sense that a growth comes out on our body, an excrescence. It is a species of spiritual cancer, cells growing by feeding on the rest. The necessity for spiritual growth is not merely our personal problem. It is that, but it is more. It is our world problem. At the center of almost every acute problem, personal, social, economic, political, and international, is moral and spiritual immaturity. I want to read that again. At the center of almost every acute problem, personal, social, economic, political, and international, is moral and spiritual immaturity. The problems and the possibilities in almost every situation have outgrown the persons. We are immature persons dealing with mature problems. Dr. Rebecca Beard says, the consuming illness of our times is our immaturity, our refusal to grow up. We have on our hands powers and possibilities for mature people, but the people who handle these powers are immature. Here is a man who is supposedly the head of a home in a situation demanding maturity, but he is emotionally immature. He creates havoc. The same thing happens in larger situations in organization, the school, the church, business, the state, and the international relationship. Each time the area of possible havoc grows larger. Deficiency in our moral and spiritual growth means devastation around us. Our immaturity is costly, increasingly so. For larger and larger power and responsibility is put more and more into the hands of people morally and spiritually too immature to handle them for the collective good. As has often been said, our intellectual lives have outgrown our moral and spiritual lives. We have received grown-up powers handled by half-grown persons, and that is serious. For the powers we now have are such that an irresponsible mistake by a few immature people can set the world on fire, literally. Spiritual maturity is no longer a luxury for a few. It is a necessity for us all. Wow. If I wasn't awake, I'm awake now. I'm awake to the fact that spiritual maturity is not optional. We were meant and made to grow spiritually. What I hear him saying to me from these pages of these thoughts that came back in the 1930s and 40s, and certainly came all the way from the time that he got to India at the beginning of the 20th century. Here was a man who observed people up close and personal, living in a country where he was in a minority of 3% of the population of the country. There was nothing in that culture around him that was going to be supportive of what he believed or how he lived. And here he is at the end of this is his last devotional, I believe, that he had about 7 or 8 other devotional books that are fantastic. He's calling out to culture and says, what we need are spiritually mature people. In the book, as we read into it, he will describe the path toward this. He will describe it imperfectly, the same way that everything I say is imperfect. But he will honestly convict each one of us, I'm sure, that there is a kind of spirituality that we need to develop that is is balanced. It's the maturity of the mind, the emotions, and the will. How many times have I, as a pastor, noticed that people can have an incredible Bible knowledge, but they're totally incompetent when it comes to dealing with relationships? How many times have I seen people be incredibly loving in their family, but they have no clue about what it means to integrate out into the society and be salt and light? How many times have I found myself unbalanced? We are called to be spiritually balanced for the delivery of love. Now, that's the way I would express it here in the century in which I live. I've developed my own language to communicate with the people that I'm around, and I'm sure you've done the same thing in your work and in your life. One of the things that he did say that I just want to bring your attention to, he says, the resources for spiritual growth are available. But he did not say they come from the bookstore. He said they come from God. Now, this is a theme with Stanley Jones. It's a theme that you'll hear him repeating over and over and over again. I've read many of his books repeatedly. The one on the Sermon on the Mount, I think I've read about 7 times. It just speaks to me. And even though it's written so long ago, it just still speaks to me. It answers those questions. I just didn't know where to go to get answers. And one of the things is that he says that what we Christians need to understand is that the greatest ability that we can ever develop is receptivity. Now, I've been teaching that through Abide International for the last 28 years to tell people that you must learn to receive. Faith is receiving. And to grow spiritually, you need the 100% belief that God is generous toward those who want to mature. And he will define for us maturity in his way. And I think what I'll be doing is, after we read the devotional each day, I will make a few comments, maybe to kind of put things into the context of the world that we're living in right now. But I can tell you this, that the 20th century was a century of such horrendous suffering and war and the rise of the totalitarian governments. The 20th century was perhaps the bloodiest, most dangerous century in the history of the world. Now, I know that those of us who grew up in the United States and many in Europe and other places, me, for instance, I'm being born in 1951. I didn't experience the Second World War, certainly not the First World War. So this man is writing out of a context of incredibly complex things. So here is what I think he's saying when he tells us that he wrote this book because there's a problem. And that problem is what he calls spiritual growth or spiritual maturity. What is that? And how does that work? So that's what we'll be doing. We'll be doing that in the morning. Probably take about maybe at the most 15 minutes or so. And when I do my devotional time and I read these giants of the faith like Oswald Chambers and My Utmost for His Highest and Stanley Jones, I just kind of take a deep breath and say, wow, and these people were not perfect. There's a lot of things probably about his life that I'll never understand or know. But all I can tell you is that by listening to the voice of someone who has lived this 55 years as a missionary, who expressed this in thousands of speeches and sermons given to people who did not believe, traveling the entire world as he did, it just seems like to me a banquet of opportunity to be able to not have to start from zero, but to talk, to have somebody just to talk to and answer our questions. Now, I know there are thousands and thousands of self-help books in the United States and Europe and across the world, and I know that there are radio broadcasts every day But for me, there's just something about the depth of the practical outworking of the Christian life in this particular man's life that I've recommended to many people over the years. And I thought we would give this a try. I thought we would just have devotions together. So that's the devotion for today. I've introduced you to this dear man who went to be with the Lord in 1973. He had only one daughter, and now his granddaughter, or either great-granddaughter, I'm not sure which, is publishing all of his books, and so they're becoming available easily now, and you can find all kinds of things. You can even hear on, if you go on Google and type in E.Stanley Jones, you can actually hear a few of his sermons, which is cool, which is wonderful. We live in such great days, but they're difficult days. And I hope you'll accept this invitation for however long we do this. Once you get into the flow of this thing, you won't need me. And so I don't know how long we'll do this. Maybe it'll be for 2 or 3 months. Not sure. I'll be listening to you. You can give me what you think. And my goal is just to help you to understand what it means to grow spiritually. And so I asked my friend Stanley Jones to join us every day, Monday through Friday. And I'm going to begin it. I'm not going by the date because the book is written, so you start in January and you go for it. But I'll be going by the first devotional, the second, the third, the fourth, and we'll just be going as far as we can. And so I'll try to explain that as we move along. Hey, have a great day. I've already noticed the names of our group that kind of developed during the pandemic. It's good to see all of you. Send me a little message. Let me know what you're doing, what you think, and I'll see you tomorrow morning. Let's see, right now here it's 7:52 in the morning in Brazil. So I think in the Eastern Standard Time in the United States, it's like maybe just before 7 a.m. And in my friends in Portugal, it's 4 hours later. And my friends in Israel, they're already into the afternoon. So wherever you are, God bless you. And let's grow spiritually together. God bless you. Have a great day.